All right. Good evening, everybody. We will get rocking and rolling. A couple more might roll in. I'll do attendance in a minute. Also need to ask you your middle names at some point before you leave. So somebody please remind me to do that simple housekeeping. Um, but again, last week's recap, and then we'll get rolling into the new stuff. And we have Dan was fortunate enough to join us to be our guest speaker, which is a new one we're doing, which I'm kind of excited about. So again, if you haven't texted me yet, please just shoot me a quick text so I have your name. All of you who didn't do that last week and you did text me at some point during the week, I appreciate you putting your name in. It's always super helpful when you do that. So again, just so I have it and you have my number, again, any questions you need moving forward throughout the training, just send them to me and I'll get them to the right person. Um, Again, what you need to do, and again, we can stay on after if you need help, is Dave and John. So John does youth signing, and Dave does our high school assigning. Both are beginning to put assignments in. So you need to start putting your arbiter blocks in. The PDF from last week gave a YouTube tutorial how to do that. We're happy to again go through that. And then last week's meeting, we also spent a little bit of time. A handful of you still need to put a picture in for arbiter. That's a massive help. So if you can put some kind of professional headshot in, that'd be great. Again, we will go through uniforms again tonight and where to buy them, what to buy, all those items that we'll spend a few minutes doing that. Just a reminder, we are doing 2-inch stripes, not 2 1/4. We'll give you a chance if any of you are having issues accessing any of the materials. Again, Google Drive is a little bit wonky sometimes if you're using a different email. So if you need to just simply request access, do so. I usually get back to you in with like a minute and you should get a notification that you're in. None of you said you were having any issues, but again, I know there is a tech barrier. So if anything doesn't work, just let me know. John and I try to check links a whole bunch. And sometimes, especially videos, go MIA very quickly on YouTube and other places. So just let us know if you find a broken link. Tell us. We'll get into the homework. We kind of put it in. I don't actually feel that this group are going to have issues, but when we start giving you assignments, there was a small one. Again, they're smaller items, but just twofold of this one we're going to have you doing hand signals and mechanics and things like that of you can do it in a mirror, you can record yourself if your partner, spouse, whoever lives in your house, a roommate, right, do it in front of them. And then even more importantly, we want you to connect with one another as well. So jot a name down that you see in the participants or on the screen, or if you already know each other. The goal is for you to also be able to go into Arbiter, click under people, find somebody else, start a connection, but it also to learn the software and start talking just again, like if you see in games or if you get a new partner, you need to contact them anyway. So learning how to do those things, and then again, also gives you, a little bit, we always say that strength in numbers, where if you're having trouble with something, start reaching out to one another. Obviously, you can reach out to Dick, myself, or John, or anybody else on the call. But again, just a different way of doing it on by design, purposely to give you a chance um, to meet one another. So without further ado, since I'm going to talk a whole bunch later, we are going to go over to Dan, and then we'll go over the itinerary once he's done. And I'm going to stop sharing and let Dan and I'm going to try to switch my recording mode over to presenter. So we just have him. And so eventually when Dan comes up here and he'll introduce himself, but he graduated from last year, has a massive background in officiating, specifically in football, and also does training. Him and I talked, I don't know how many million times. We were always in a car traveling someplace, but he was really, really awesome last year and gave us a ton of feedback and instrumental in helping us make improvements and everything going forward. So again, we're going to give Dan a good 5 or however many plus minutes that he wants to talk, or if you want to ask questions. We felt and totally Dan's idea was an awesome kind of guest speaker to come in and talk about being in the class as a actual learner and not a teacher. So I will stop talking with that. Dan, you have the floor, good sir.
All right, great. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Just give me a thumbs up if I'm coming through. Great. Okay. So, so Rob, thanks so much for the intro. And I really just wanted to come on for like 5, 10 minutes, guys, and just give you So it's one thing, I don't know what your background is in officiating. I happen to do high school and college football, so this was new to me to take up the new sport. It's a very long story how I got into lacrosse. But I did the training with Rob last year and then did the full season. I was just talking to Rob prior to your training class and said it might be good to get a guy on that actually, was new to lacrosse officiating, even though I've done years and years of football, and just kind of give you a sense of like what to expect. 'Cause it's one thing if you haven't officiated before to go through Rob's class. And by the way, Rob's class relative to I've been through several of these and I've taught several of these. You're in very good hands, with Dick and John and Rob. This is probably one of the better Connecticut training classes you're going to get. So just a couple of things, and I'm gonna, at the risk of being pedantic, this is not, if you've officiated before, forgive me, but I think it's important just to understand as you're going through the class and then you go onto the field, just some of the things you're going to be feeling, some of the things you're going to witness. And if I can be of any help, I'm on Arbiter too, text me, call me, what have you. But I want to make a couple of points that I think are important for you to think about as you're getting ready. First of all, if you haven't started doing already, get on the treadmill, get on the bike. You've got to get in shape. Lacrosse is a very, very tactile sport where you're running a lot as opposed to, us lazy guys in football. I'm a line of scrimmage official. You don't really have to move that much. Lacrosse, you are moving all the time. So please get in shape. The points I was going to make are as follows. One, there are a couple of things when we go out in the field for the first couple of times, and I tell this to the people in football, you are going to make a lot of mistakes your freshman year, your first year doing this. And instead of being nervous about it, like I sort of was when I started football, and even when I started lacrosse, you got to lean into it. You're going to get great training here, but you are, pardon my French, you're going to fuck up multiple times a game. You're going to blow inadvertent whistles. You're going to throw the flag, forget the number. Like Rob, I always laugh. You tell the story about your first game calling a foul and then forgetting the number of the guy. Like we all did that. I even did that last year. I do that in football from time to time. You're going to make mistakes. And I think the difference between an unsuccessful and a successful first year is remember the mistakes and the things you did wrong in any particular game, of which you will make many, and learn from them. So, one of the best pieces of advice I got, I did think, John, you told me this, is every game try to just have a little goal in mind, whether it's you want, if there's a slashing foul, administer the foul properly, throw the flag properly. If it's an out of bounds or the ball goes past the goalie, how are you going to administer the play in and so forth. So have little goals every game and think about, okay, it's mid-season, I did X, Y, and Z right, I've been doing A, B, and C wrong. Try to focus on A or B just to make yourself better. Rob will always talk about catching, the expression is catching whales, not minnows. And I know that's early in the class, but what that means is we really want to, I think, your freshman year, your first year, focus heavily on the safety fouls. They're going to be, Dick told me, I remember last year, there's things like play on and these not more nuanced rules, and those are important to know. But you definitely want to get the guy that's like beating someone else over the head with his stick versus whether some nuanced push rule comes into effect. So really focus on the big safety fouls, particularly your first couple of games. Um, Another thing that if you haven't officiated before, you're in for a rude awakening as insofar as working with coaches and listening to parents. Some of you guys may have played lacrosse before and it's fun, and it's a different deal officiating any sport. And I would say in the spectrum of like golf is over here and hockey is over here, no offense to hockey, lacrosse is kind of middle leaning toward hockey in terms of intensity. And trust me, I do football, so we're on the same like spectrum of craziness. But I would say my favorite expression is, somebody told me this a while ago. There's an inverse correlation to talent, and um, I'll try to say it in a G-rated way, how big of an asshole the coaches and parents are. And by inverse correlation, I mean the younger the group that you're officiating, the bigger asshole the coaches and parents. Not that all of them are. There are a lot of really good ones out there, but you are going to find I don't even do youth football anymore, even if they call me, just because I can't. But I do youth lacrosse and so forth. So I say this because there will probably come a time in the season where a parent or a coach is off the reservation. Okay. What I have found, and I got to ref with a lot of really cool guys, and you're going to love meeting a lot of guys on this board. This is a really good, fun board. Okay. And my favorite pregame speech is something like this. And I would ask you to start making this part of your repertoire. The guy that I was with said, called both coaches together and said, look, guys, this is not going to be part of a YouTube video that goes viral where you do something batshit crazy and then parents do. It's not going there. I appreciate you guys coaching. I hope you appreciate us refereeing. There are two of us. There are 11 actions going on out on the field at any given point in time. We're going to miss things. We're going to call things wrong. But I don't need you to go like off the reservation. And he said, now you actually use this for football too. If I turn to you and say, okay, coach, turn the page, it means that I'm this close to making you go stand by the tennis courts over there and leaving. That's going to embarrass you. That's going to embarrass your kid. And we don't want to do that. And I'm not focusing on that to get you nervous. It's just going to happen. What I am focusing on is that Rob and Dick and John are going to do an awesome job on the rules, but nobody really coaches you on like what happens on the field. So what I would say to you, and then I'll conclude and see if you have any questions, is A, if you don't know what the call is, you fake it. You make your loud projected voice. You make big demonstrative signals about a foul or so forth. And it's kind of like you've heard the expression fake it till you make it. That's what your freshman year of officiating is all about. And John and Rob and Dick would tell you they still mess up, man. Like there's not a perfect game that you're going to have, but what I really hope A is that you have fun this year, and B you give yourself a lot of grace and you kind of laugh at yourself, and every game you will make mistakes, but every game that you're going to continue to get better. So I hope that helped, guys. I'll stop, see if anybody has any questions, but it was part comic relief, part like reality. This is what you're getting yourself into, but it's a hell of a lot of fun, and you're going to meet a lot of really cool guys. Really.
I'll start your round of applause, even if they're muted.
Yeah, Dan, that was awesome. That was awesome.
Any questions or comments for Dan?
It was spot on. That's all I could say. It was spot on.
Awesome. Well, Dan, we super appreciate you. I enjoyed it as well. And again, I think it is a very good microcosm of not only what your first year is, but even like I said, my 16th year is also a lot like a first year, right? You're gonna make mistakes. You need to have fun. You need to set some goals, and things are gonna go sideways. And if you can get out of there and get home safe, it's what it's all about, right? At the end of the day. So appreciate everything on your end, and thank you again.
Good job, Dan.
Yeah, great job.
I want to ref with Dan.
He's fun. He is super awesome. And so just I know we do have two new people who joined us right now. I know both Mark and Eduardo, right? You're both on. So if you can just do a quick introduction of who you are, where you're from, give me any officiating experience, lacrosse experience, all that good stuff, please.
Hi, I'm Mark Pompey. I live in Western Mass, but I work in Canaan, Connecticut. I'm new down here in the northwest corner of Connecticut. I work for Betkin Dickinson. This is my 12th year of officiating lacrosse at the high school level. I do youth and high school. Um, my reasoning for joining your board is because obviously with the commute, I can't get to Western Mass, a lot of the schools in the Springfield area, and I have a hard time even getting to some of the schools in the Pittsfield and North Berkshire County area. So I've done prep. I've done mostly JV prep schools, some varsity, no shot clock. I've done a couple of shot clock games with 3-man mechanics. On the football side, I've been officiating football since 1987 at the high school level. Um, so that's pretty much me. I'm looking forward to being on the field and being able to get to schools that I can reach.
We are super excited to have you as well. And same thing. And again, I think I put an email up on the transfers. This portion is a mandatory, but you are more than welcome to stay and learn anything. We're going over all the super basics tonight. So you can be in and out. If you just want to tell us to go kick rocks, that's cool too. We won't take it personally.
Thank you.
We're good. Awesome to have you. Eduardo, please.
Yes, so I'm from Manchester, Connecticut, and my past refereeing experience, I've been a soccer ref for about 3 years now, and a basketball ref for 1 year. And I wanted to join lacrosse because one of my basketball officials I worked with recently just recommended to me that they were also starting lacrosse for a spring sport, and so it interested me. And I've really been liking roughing for high school sports this first year. It's been keeping me busy and active throughout the week. And so I have experience playing soccer and basketball, but no experience playing lacrosse yet. I've watched a few games, but it's not one of my more experienced sports. Um, but yeah, I'm just excited to learn the new rules and be officiating on the field outside again this spring, hopefully.
Awesome. Excited to have you. And so we will get a rock and roll. Let me just get my video panel back up. All right, cool. So we will get moving. We're going to start with an activity. And then again, the goal for tonight, we're actually going to go through 3 rules, which sounds like a lot, but is actually not. Lacrosse is a very similar to almost every game, and we'll explain this, is there's actually only 7 rules in lacrosse. The issue is each rule has about 42 sections and about 7 subsections. Right. So when we start with the rule itself, easy peasy. And then it takes a long time. So when we get to rule 4, which is play the game, and then we get to personal and technical fouls, those are going to be whole entire classes because they were very dense and long. But we're going to go through the 3 kind of easier ones tonight, and we're going to again try to break it down. And as always, just as a reminder, and John and Dick and I spoke about it. Last week is this is a super active group, and that is amazing. So again, if you feel we're going too fast on something or want to go back, or you're not sure on something, even though we have the video, just stop us, let us know, and we're happy to kind of do that. So just think to yourself, and then again, because we're not pulling teeth with this group, not that the last one was bad, Dan was a talkative and you were 2 talkative ones for last year, right? But just for the sake of time, and because we have a much larger group this year, think of, if you, and then I'll ask for 2 or 3 of you to go and do this. If you had to explain to your 90-year-old grandmother or 90-year-old neighbor what lacrosse is, and they've never seen it before, how would you do that?
As a head scratcher. I ain't the only one scratching my head. I see you, Dick.
Are you looking for somebody to say something?
Yeah, nope. I've just given the quick pause on
Oh,
it,
okay.
and then who wants to start? We'll go two or three people, please.
Yeah, I'll go. It's pretty easy. It's a bunch of teenagers running around bashing each other over the head with sticks.
Is does anybody win though? Who wins? Whoever bashes the hardest?
Whoever's not bleeding, I guess.
Okay. Okay.
I would tell grandma it's a cross between uh, football and hockey with sticks and a little ball.
Okay. And again, I'm nobody's answered grandma's question. Maybe we just ignore the older person in the room, which happens from time to time, right? But who wins? Who wins this? How come nobody said there's a winner? You said it was a game, right? Don't you have to win games?
Of course. Of course.
But that's more than one sentence.
A lot of commas in the sentence.
Who could
I
break
could
it down
have
for me in one sentence? How do we explain lacrosse?
try to score a small ball in a goal past someone that's trying to, stop that ball from going in the goal.
Okay. And again, how do we get a winner?
Whoever scores the most goals.
All right, Tom's on it. So we'll combine. I'll give you some reprieve. Now, I know Coach Cheese is immediately going to say, "Hey, Rob, you're cheating. That's more than one sentence." Do this, right? But this is our definition, right? So if we pulled out the greens, we'll use Tom's, and then we'll add Mark's bashing of the head, right? Right within there too. But essentially, right, it's a game between two teams with the winner being whoever scores a ball into the opponent's goal more times. And if we use a semicolon, we say, and it is sometimes violent, but is also beautiful and is a really good mix between hockey, soccer, football, and a little bit of basketball, all mixed in one, right? That's a little bit cheating because that's kind of a compound sentence, right? But you kind of get the point of we kind of get through the basics, right?
That's a
And
paragraph.
I still think it's two. I got a semicolon in there though, right? And so to the larger point of we then need to start dissecting what we need,
Take a
right?
picture.
We're going to need two teams. We're going to need somebody to score. We need to define what a score is, just like in every sport. We have some kind of definition of what that is. We're going to need the ball entering the goal or fully crossing that goal line. And then we're going to need winners. And then we're going to need, some kinds of additional rules that come in and kind of tell us how that kind of occurs. So again, if you're a note taker or if you're I always go back to teaching and coaching, the three things we want to remember for tonight when we talk about rules. And I always owe this to Steve Hinchy, who's our former rules interpreter, and you're going to meet at the clinic and is still an active official with us, of what do rules do? They only do three things, right? And that's it. And it sounds like a lot, but it's really not, right? They're going to define what something is. When we say, what is the game? That was your actual definition, right? We say goal. It's going to define how you can score a goal. It might define what a penalty is, right? We also have rules that restrict. You cannot, and this is just about all sports, you cannot trip other players. You cannot hold them. You might not be able to catch and throw the ball in with your hand. That's a restriction, right? Or something that prohibits, right? And that you can't hit each other in the head, right? Or you can't use vulgarity towards an official, or you can't start a game with less than 7 players, right? Or excuse me, 10 players ready to go, and you can't continue a game with 7, right? So there's a whole bunch of rules that go into that, but essentially they have three bigger characteristics that are in play. So as we read the rules, we got to remember, and always the first one we usually get on questions is somebody usually stops us now immediately and goes, well, when I coach youth lacrosse and I see, a whole bunch of, and I'll use marks of people, teenagers or less than teenagers, bashing each other in the head. What defines a slash, sir? Right? And then we start the conversation that way. And that's a real tough way to start a conversation, right? We can define it. And then again, we have to remember that we are in a very dynamic game. similar to other sports, but very unique to other sports. Again, we have a ton of different movement. We have everything centered around the ball, and it's very tough to see, right? Because again, depending on the speed of the game, you have grown adults or younger people running at full speed, arguing over a 2-inch ball, and you're throwing a 6-foot piece of metal in order to dislodge that ball. We need to know exactly where that hits. And there's full contact, and there's grass, and there's slipping, and there's all these things. So just remember that within this, we're going to, again, just like last week, we're going to have the letter of the law of what the rule book says, the John Burnett specialty, and then kind of what you need to do to get out of here alive, which is the Rob Holub specialty, right? Right. And we combine both of those, right, to be good officials. We need to know what the rule book says, but we also need to use common sense. A lot of times, a common sense will get us through a lot of those jams as we need. So the one other activity, I think, again, for the sake of not doing breakouts and all that fun stuff, we'll have you, kind of go through, but we're going to break out in terms of categories, and a couple of you can shout things out. And we're going to go through, what do we need to play this game? So again, if we had 90-year-old grandmother and she says, I really like that game where two people throw a ball into a net and try to murder each other, right? It's kind of what we decided on as a group here of what do we actually need to play that? So we'll start in the space idea, and feel free, unmute yourself, you can shout it out. We'll go through, I'll put all the answers at the end, but we're going to do space first and then move through the other categories. What do we need in terms of space?
Field.
Football field.
Okay. Is there anything specific about the field that we need?
Field with lines and boundaries.
Yeah. Very good start. We need a field with lines, specific lines. We'll get into those in a minute.
You need 2 goals.
We need goals.
Clear and flat with at least consistent grass.
You are very, very optimistic in the world of a flat field with grass on it.
110
Yes.
yards.
Yes, generally speaking, we want a nice grass field with proper drainage, no giant crown or things like that, right? But we do, to the larger point, not to be funny about, we want free of obstructions, right? We want to make sure that unfortunately, there are some fields that are not well maintained, and we don't want broken glass, or we don't want, a giant pothole or divot or things of that nature. We don't want other things protruding out, right? And so we want that. What else do we want in our space?
You need clearly delineated team areas, penalty box areas,
Restraining box.
the restraining box, and where the timekeeper and the penalty keeper sits.
Yep. And so, so we need a bench area, right? We need a team area. We need it to also be safe behind the goals as well. And so this even gets into, I always use the example of Nanawag, one of the high schools, plays next to a playground, and there is a legitimate playground by the end line, right? And so it's understanding that you might have 3, 4, 5-year-olds behind the goal, and understanding that, right? And so again, it's not necessarily perfect, right? In that I made a little bit of fun of Alex on that, but it might not be a perfect field. It might not just be lined for lacrosse. So understanding all those, we'll kind of pivot. I'm sure we'll have a few more when I reveal them. But on the equipment side, what do we need for equipment in order to play the game?
2 nets.
Yep, 2 nets,
Game ball.
a ball, right? We told grandma you got to score a ball, right? So the whole point of the game, right? What else do we need?
Helmets. Shoulder pads. Gloves.
Yeah, required
Forms.
Yep, all the player equipment. What else do we need to start the game, though?
Need a clock.
Whistle.
Yep, we need some kind of clock. Yep, our equipment. I'll take that. I'll kind of lump that category. We need some kind of clock, right? We also need where they need to write things down, a scorebook, right?
Mm-hmm.
We might need we do need some type of audible horn, right, to signal the end of quarters, and if there's an issue at the table and things of that nature. What's the other major kind of equipment, not necessarily we're bringing, but you want it especially every high school and youth. It's another person that brings that and is really important to keeping everybody safe.
The
First
chest
aid.
protectors.
Yeah, not chest protectors. I'll
Trainer.
kind of
Med
somebody else.
bag.
Yeah, like right, we want some kind of medical bag. Again, not us as officials, but thinking to the larger game, right? We want something to keep everybody safe, some kind of medical personnel at every game, right? Regardless of what sport it is, to make sure we're good. And in lacrosse, unfortunately, one of the sports that if we can have an AED out at every field, that is a life-saving piece of equipment at this point for our sport, right? So, and then we'll get into those, why we have certain chest protectors or things like that with what's called comial cordis. And then people wise, what do we need to have the game?
Hey, John, could I just go back and ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So on your in the MIAA, we don't on football. You have to have medical people, EMTs. Both teams have to bring one. For lacrosse, it's not required. A lot of teams do bring them. What's the rule in Connecticut? Do you guys have to have EMTs on the field before you start the game?
We don't need EMTs on the field. They just have to have some type of medical personnel designated through the home team.
Okay, thanks.
And so that's on the high school and the U side, generally not, right? It's unfortunate, but we generally don't see that. But on the high school side, there's some kind of designated, but good question.
Thank you.
Yep. On the people side, who do we need?
Players from both teams.
Yeah, we need players, number one.
Coaches.
We need coaches. We need at least one, right? Adult, so to speak, in order to be a coach on the sideline to start the game.
Officials.
We need officials. And then what's the last people we need?
Fans.
No. We don't need fans. We
Players.
might want fans.
Players.
Not the players. So we had
Yeah, players.
officials, coaches, and players. What?
Scorekeeper.
Yeah, right. We need some kind of staff. We need a scorekeeper, a timekeeper, things of that. One person will serve, but again, we do need that, right? By the rules. And what things do we need?
Things.
Flags.
That's equipment.
That's equipment. That's
Right. I always like throwing those as nobody ever gets them, so we're good. So we'll go through them, but we'll do the things in a second, right? But on the space side, we nailed them all, right? Is the field, the lines, the benches, table area. I would say bleachers because we do have fans, right? Some kind of designated fan area, just a way. And if we're talking youth, we actually have rules more so in the youth game than the high school game, right? Is that they're actually on opposite sides, that parents can't sit or fans cannot sit on the same side as the players and the coaches for an intentional separation, right? And again, the space of, we have it. I don't know if it goes in the knee category, but you get my point of, we have parking and restrooms and things like that, right? As officials getting to a game, we need to put our car someplace, right? And a lot of times we're running from work. So that restroom is awesome before you go out and run a whole bit, right? And so on the equipment side, we kind of went through all these, but things like water, again, the safety side, the scoring side. On the people side, we hit them all. The idea of some type of facility person is also nice, especially if we're doing a high school game, right? We might have ball retrievers. It's not often used, but in the rule book, it actually states we can have them. And again, sometimes administrators, especially when we get on higher up, it's nice to know who the administrators are. And then again, within high school, we have a site supervisor, and even the prep and the college side, we have an actual site supervisor as defined versus just a coach. So if there's an actual issue, you were to go to that site supervisor and then go from there. On the thing side, right, in order to complete our game, we do need rules. We also need some type of timing. I also say that safety side goes in there. Everything generally now goes through arbiter pay. Youth games still pay in cash, which is nice. I just got a million tax forms. Unfortunately, it's not back in the old days. But again, things like W-9s, you might want to print them out. I like send if you are technologically savvy, email a W-9 to your phone and have it downloaded on your phone so you can, if you again go to high schools and an AD or the person before the game asks for one and you do have your phone, you can email it sometimes really quickly, and that's an easier one. And then we need knowledge of the game. We need that positive attitude, as we said, and that's not just lip service. We need to go in not being angry at the world and making sure that we're being professional and things like that. And then to Dan point about what John had said, and I really do believe this, of not only having that expectation exercise we did last week, but having a goal, right? For every single time we go out, and as small as it is of what you want to accomplish or what you want to get better at or what do you want to help your partner with. So again, a different way of looking at it, but a fun little exercise to kind of go through what
Rob, can
is,
I jump
yeah, go
in
ahead.
before you go?
Absolutely.
Before you
Yep.
go? So one thing just that you might want to think about when you get to the field, maybe take a macro look at the whole field as you kind of step out there, just for sort of the big things that you can observe quickly. Like, are there some things that are too close to the field? Like there's a soccer net and it's too close to the end line. It's not in a safe position. That's one thing you want to look at. You can take a look at where the tables are for the staff. Is the clock a visible clock? One thing that you didn't mention was something that you want to have on the field. You want to have 7 of them. Do you know what that is?
John has never worked a youth game in his life.
When you look over the field,
Is there cones?
yeah,
Yeah, I was
cones.
gonna say somebody
Say that
mumbled it. Yep.
pylons or something.
And it's great to kind of catch that early, because if they're not there when you walk over to before you talk with the coaches, you can talk to an assistant coach or whatever, and just remind them. Sometimes they forget about that. So that's something that if you start from a macro perspective, looking over the big picture, looking for things that sort of stick out right away, and then you can go into the finer details. Is there a scorebook? Is there, some of the other things? So just
Why 7? Is there like a designated area for the 7?
Yep. Well, I got a diagram. I'll show you momentarily on that one.
Okay.
Remind me, please, when we get there. So then as we go, and again, within your rule book, right, it's going to take you some time. So we suggest, again, you don't need to read all 100 plus pages tomorrow. We're not looking for that, but make sure you're reading a few pages every day or a few pages every week to get through this, because it takes some time. It is crazy dense, as we said, right? But the first thing we kind of start with in rule 1 is, again, explaining and defining what we have. So the first thing is we need 10 players on each team in order to start the game, and we need them legally equipped as well. So we not only need legally equipped what we call field players, which is non-goalies, and then we have goalies, which have a different set, and we'll get in what actually defines them. But essentially, we boil them down from attack, midfield, and defensemen. Defensemen are privileged with having longer 6-foot sticks versus just the 4-foot sticks as what we call short sticks. We also need goals. They are 6x6. There is 2 types. Is very, you normally see what they call an obtuse kind of angle-ish, or the right angle cages. And so nets, we want to make sure that becomes our responsibility to just note whether or not they have holes. It is then the home team, to fix them. We generally speaking will pitch out, especially if it's zip ties or things like that, because usually coach is just lucky to find said zip ties. But again, you don't want holes in the net. By rule, they actually have to be orange. We're not going to penalize or not play a game if they are a little bit rusty or an off-color orange, or if you're going to argue Pantone color, that's a minnow, right? At the end of the day. But we need them orange, right? By rule, 6 feet. There's certain places for them. Again, we need a ball. I don't know why this animation is doing this, but I'm sorry, this is really distracting me. And so we need a rubber lacrosse ball. By default, we use white. The rule does allow that you can have a total of 4 colors. The same must be used for the duration of the game. Extremely seldomly do we use something outside of white. In my entire career, we've used yellow or green while playing indoors, and we've used orange. I had one snow game we used orange, and I've played snow games with white as well, which gets fun. But that is really the idea of changing the color. The white will be played in 99.9% of all of your games as an official in your entire career, and I'm not joking. They have these stamps on these, and these are important, is that we need this little thing called NOXI, and NOXI is a accrediting body that makes sure that things are made to a certain standard, most specifically in order to make sure that certain safety regulations are met. So if there's an injury, that the piece of equipment including could be your helmet, could be your chest protector, and also the ball does not cause further injury because it wasn't met to a standard. Now, that is a very fancy way of saying we look down at the first ball we have, and as long as we have a Noxie ball to start the game, we're super good. And why that mattered a long time ago is we had a lot of different standards of balls. There was injuries and there was lawsuits. So we had a witch hunt to find Noxie balls at some point. And so that is something we still do, is just find that what's called Noxie. And again, they do the certification for helmets in most sports, along
Now,
others.
hopefully you can see that on the ball. The Noxie is the NOCSAE that's stamped on the
That
ball.
Is that the brand?
No, that is a national organization of like safety and equipment, something of that. Noxie, again, is the accrediting body. Champion is the brand up here. But again, it can be, we don't care about the brand of the ball. It just needs to, it will literally, every ball should be imprinted with Noxie. There was very few. We had a transition at a certain point from non-Noxie to Noxie. And again, this is oversharing, but to the point of the market got flooded because every store around the country was selling non-Noxie balls for, 10% of what the price was. So every youth organization bought them and they were everywhere, and it was legitimately a legal issue. So just something to look down. We still do it at this point. You look at the ball real quick and you're good. Most balls will come out of a box. If we're playing high school, the coaches keep the balls away. Again, if you're a youth or JV and there's a bucket of balls that are completely muddy or what we call greasers, find the best one and go from there. As long as it's got Noxie, do the best you can, especially if it's a dirt field, they're going to get worn down. But if we have a nice new one, great. With that said, we move to the field. We're not going to overly complicate the field when we do this. But to that point, we did have our question on the 7. You can actually see them. And so it's 4 corners, one at the 50 on the far side, and then we have 2 in between what we call the box or the substitution area. The one big change for this year is not necessarily the substitution area change. So it's a 10-yard total or 5 yards on each side of this midline. So again, this middle line is called our midline, right? And so with that said, we now are they finally published it. It's driven me crazy because it's been in the rule books for 2 years and now they decided it's a thing again. But we are going to move the teams back into their team areas, which is the key. The first few games, or if you're doing a youth game and again a grass field and there's only 6 total kids on the bench, we're not going to overly police it. But what we are really trying to accomplish is, especially when we have a table and we're doing a high school game, this timer table and score table cannot see what goes on. So we want to move everybody out of the areas. The very nice line to go off of is our wing line. And again, to not try to overly complicate for one team, this is going to be the offensive half, and we have the defensive half.
Rob, let me just jump in for just a second. If you watch the video that was assigned for tonight, you heard them talking about a substitution area that was twice as long. The rule changed a while back after that was presented, and now for both college, prep school, and high school, the substitution area is 10 yards long, 5 on each side of the midline. So if you were confused about why they were talking about it being much larger, it's because at one time it was.
Thank you. Again, we're going to spend time on the crease area, right? So the crease is where the goal is, the privileged and goalie area. It's prohibited from the other offensive players, right? And then again, we're going to have things called an attack area. This has meaning, right? And then we have things called a restraining line. And when we get in and talk about our face-offs, a face-off is actually just a 3-on-3 scrimmage play. Is all the other players on the field are restrained back until we have certain conditions, and then we play, and we'll get into how many players can be on one side. But again, not to overly confuse, we have an end line and what we call sidelines, and our midline are the big areas. And again, we'll spend more time going in, and Tim from Texas, his video does a great job explaining the field and going through everything. In the event Again, don't overly commit a lot of brain power to this one. We have very few fields. There is one in New Haven that has it at Amistad. There's very few other fields. But again, because of budgetary restraints, the national organizations agreed that they can play on what's called a unified field for high school or for youth. That is combining the girls' field with the boys' field. The girls play on a different field and have different lining. And so, again, if there is a field with both of those that work and is what called unified, again, very seldom that occurs. There are a few youth fields that are that way, but that is what the actual difference is. Almost everybody will be playing on the normal field. Essentially, the only big difference it does, as we said, is it elongates the field a little bit longer to accommodate the lines not having to be painted twice, especially on turf, and that was the reason. So we then go into the other equipment. We're going to try to gloss again. We're going to put additional videos in the recap, things like that, if you're looking at it. But again, we have what we call a short stick. So this is our standard cross. And again, cross, C-R-O-S-S-E, in French, meaning stick. And so la, meaning the, cross, stick. So lacrosse means the stick, the game, right? That's your French lesson for the day on that one. And so again, your cross is the actual stick you use, and we call it a cross all throughout the rule book. Is you're going to have one that is between 40 and 42 inches. Then there is parameters around this. Again, for the sake of your brain not exploding, we're not going to overly get into it. And then defensemen, and there's allowed a maximum of 4 of them on the field at all times. And so that is now 50 inches to 72 inches. So essentially 6 feet. Most people don't cut it down, but you see them. And then youth has other restrictions in terms of how many can be played.
52 to 72.
Excuse me, 52 to 72. Thank you. And so he's kind of like my game show guy who goes back at the end, or like pardon the interruption, the guy that logs all my errors for me, right? So within the cross, right, then we call it the head of the cross. And so within that, again, where they're catching the ball and then the shaft of the cross is we have mesh. At this point, and you used to be able to use rawhide and leather, and the rule book still has all these wonderful additional things that you can still, including wood, you can make your stick out and still be legal. But at this point, it is all plastic and all metal shafts. And so within that, we have then mesh and synthetic mesh that is then firmly affixed and throughout the entire head. And then we have what's called shooting strings, or these small ones are called nylon because they're just made out of nylon. And essentially, that helps you throw the ball and kind of give a little bit of a lip, or like the end of your fingertips, to be able to roll the ball out accurately. And so there's restrictions on how far these shooting strings can go down. And that's 4 inches from any top point of the cross, or excuse me, of the head. And then you have things like butt ends and ball stops. Again, without confusing you, these are generally required. These are not things we penalize if we have them. For kind of your introduction to lacrosse, don't overly worry. We will continue to get you more and more skill sets and knowledge on these areas. But then we move to the required player equipment. So what we need, and again, you just think of a checklist from head to toe in a contact sport. We need a helmet. We need a mouthpiece. They now allow a clear mouthpiece as well. You need elbow pads or arm pads, and they should be properly worn, which meaning is on the actual elbow. You then have
clear just for college and prep.
Excuse me.
Not
clear
for
just for college and prep. If anybody's ever called a clear mallet, John, come on, man. No, clear, excuse me, is now in the college game. You need a something that is not clear within the high school. You need shoulder pads. And then they essentially are also chest pads at the same instance, but they are considered shoulder pads. They cannot be altered in any way. Rib pads are optional, but a lot of youth will wear rib pads. You need gloves that are specific for lacrosse, and then you also need shoes specific for lacrosse. There is no, again, most things are plastic molded cleats, or players wear sneakers. We're no longer in the age of, spikes being changed out and metals and things like that. And now a cup is also a required piece of equipment. More on that later. When then we get to the goalie. And the goalie, same thing. The goalie's actually less, believe it or not. And so the goalie needs to, again, have a helmet, have a mouthpiece, needs to have a throat guard or throat protector, needs to have a chest pad, which is NOXI certified. And the same thing when we get onto the cup is we essentially are going to certify the entire team by asking the head coach if all of his players are properly equipped before the game. And that absolves us of checking them. That is the head coach's responsibility each game to know that all of his players have the correct equipment. And again, the idea of it's a cardiac symptom called comio cordis, where if a ball or a blunt object can hit you in the chest, it can actually stop your heart if it's within heartbeats. So again, in order to prevent that, there's additional pieces of plastic on the inside. We're not inspecting that, but again, to overshare on risks within our sport. The goalies need gloves. They may have specific goalie gloves, which have usually some type of very hard metal or sometimes an insert of plastic, or excuse me, very hard plastic or a insert of metal on the inside for their thumbs so they don't get hit in the thumbs and break their thumb. Cup, and then again, protective shoes. The goalies also have a specific cross, as we said. To that point, we do not check for anything that is NOXI. That is now all. It is field players and goalies chest pads. And same with cup is that it is a required piece of equipment. We don't check for any of those three. If a player is wearing them, we simply ask the head coach that they need to be wearing them. When then we get to things like uniforms is I honestly couldn't tell you the exact, rules definition of what a uniform needs to be. The home team needs a white jersey and then a colored jersey for the away team. They need to have numbers on both sides. There is exact, and I'm sure Bernard will remind us in a half second here, the exact measurements of all of those numbers and letters. Very, very seldom, if ever in your career, will you see a uniform violation outside of somebody having the same number. Everybody needs an individual number, but when we get to youth and JV and lower games, we use common sense. And usually what happens is a coach runs up and says, hey, little Johnny has already been yelled at and made fun of by every one of his teammates because he forgot his jersey at home and he's going to get in trouble anyway, and mom's going to sock him upside the head. Can we please let him play with a penny with a different number? And you say yes, because we want little Johnny to have a good experience and play. It is not the end of the world within that. Same to the point, and again, when reading, there is no tinted visors. We get into glasses versus visors. I have seen that extremely seldomly within my career on that point too. Don't overly worry about things. Use common sense. They don't want both. Again, if sunglasses need to be prescription or a prescription for a tinted is not like football, they cannot have visors and clear things, and they don't make them technically for lacrosse.
What if they have the same number? If two players have the same number?
Same thing. You use your best judgment. The idea is the actual reason why they don't want two numbers is that if somebody were to foul out, right, or be ejected.
Yeah, that's similar to basketball, but
correct.
Like
that's why
they can put like a piece of tape on the number. Is that
correct? Use a piece of tape. Use your best judgment.
Okay.
If it is a varsity game, we need to figure something out, coach. Right? Again, if it's a piece of tape, borrow a different jersey, the backup goalie, something like that. Right? Let's work on it. If it's a younger level, you can use your best judgment. If there's two number 9s, you're going to know who the jerk is. Right? Right? At the end of the day.
Sometimes
again,
you'll see a helmet that's a different color. It doesn't match. It's not a big deal at the sub-varsity level. You're just going to play the game.
Are there numbers on the helmets?
There is no requirement to have anything on the helmets, but you will see most varsity programs have usually a number on the helmet, but not all teams do. Some just have logos, which is fine too. Good question. There's no 00. The home team needs to wear white. You can't wear football pads. You can't wear helmets for other sports. You cannot have any kind of audio device, but you are allowed anything medical or religious, jewelry or any kind of markings or devices or bracelets or things like that. Quick pause for questions on player equipment before we get to official equipment.
Rob,
Anything?
the only thing on the religious and medical, if it's a religious chain around the neck, it should be taped to their body. You don't want it jiggling around and loose. Not a penalty, just good advice.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So
I had
then
a comment,
go
John,
ahead.
on the
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
On the goalies, So I've had in my career where I think it's a very critical part of their equipment is the throat guard. And I've seen like the starting goalie go down, the backup goalie comes in, does not have a throat guard. And I know, after the game starts, we've already certified the coaches, everybody's properly protected by rule, but don't let the goalie come in the game unless they have a throat guard. Because if they get hit in the throat, it's going to be you want to have the kids be safe. That's my point.
Yep, agreed. And then the other counterpoint to that, and again, this is a little bit advanced, but then if a if this to that Mark's point, if the backup goalie goes in the net, right, and the varsity goalie wants to then play in the field, the varsity goalie needs to put on arm pads, right? Is technically coverage should have shoulder pads. We'll usually see them switch, but then can be wearing the throat guard as a field player as well. So it's a little nuance to that, but the same idea where we want the throat guard not only on the goalie, but if you do see that goalie come out, especially if it's a lopsided kind of game, you might see that. And that's kind of common at more lower levels, definitely not at higher levels. Awesome point. So on the official side, a good note-taking portion. And again, in terms of our shirts, again, the shirts are going to go through blow your whistles, as we said in the links were in the last recap. You can then go and search Amazon or whatever preferred place you want for not only for pants, and shoes can both be in those locations on different places called like Blow Your Whistles or Umpatire or any other place in that All Sports Officials was the other one we linked. The black piped hat, which is same for football. Any kind of clock is usually good in youth. We might have to keep the time ourselves because they don't have working scoreboard boards at sometimes at JV games. You can see it both ways is that usually if they're played first, sometimes the varsity clock operator doesn't get there or the varsity clock operator goes home. So again, the table should be able to do that, but especially in youth games, we might keep the time and that's more than okay. I totally recommend going on, Walmart or Amazon. I think I used my like 1990 Casio watch that finally died last year after 15 seasons that I paid $8 and I was upset that I had to buy one for $7 this year. Right, but it'll last me another 15 years and I literally only use it for that, right? Because it looks bigger than that, right? But it allows you to keep the time, counts down, stuff like that. Again, flags. And so a lot of these, I just took the pictures from Umpatire, but your flags, we want black on the end on the balls. A tape measure, you generally want black. I just picked them up on Amazon. They were $4. They were actually 3 for $4. I got the smaller. They're all black, more of the seamstress ones, so they're the flexible tape. Mine is 5 feet. You need it to be 6 feet. But again, if you're measuring a 6 foot pole in a stick inspection, you measure out to a point, you hold your finger, you put your other hand, and you remeasure, and you magically get 6 feet. So whatever works for you, you just want less bulk when you're running. As we kind of discussed last week, you want a Fox 40, and then there's discussion in the finger grip whistle is the most prominent. Do not get the Sonic Blast, get the Classic is the one that you want. And then there's discussion on whether or not you want what's called the CMG. And you can see within the logos right here, it says it covered mouth guard. I prefer that. Some guys don't. If you're a basketball guy and don't, whatever works for you. I also, again, you should have two whistles. I like a secondary whistle that is actually attached to what's called a Smitty lanyard. So that's a short one, and then I get to tuck in my pocket and clips onto my um, zipper. And then I like showing this is PJ Colello here. He actually uses a basketball lanyard. So a coaching lanyard, and he tucks it underneath his shirt. So I purposely gave different examples. Mark uses a Smitty missile. Josh actually just doesn't use it and is more out of the basketball. Sometimes they don't. Guys also don't like using the cover mouth guard, and they literally just use just the whistle. As Dick said last week too, a P-less whistle, and again the Fox 40 Classic is by far what you want to get. A coin. All of us were buying coins this year as an organization for a gift, so you don't need to pick up a coin. We should be getting those for you, but that will be for the coin toss. We'll explain what they call a bullet pencil. I also use different like golf pencils work. My dad gave me a box. I have about 50,000, so that's about a bajillion lifetimes worth. So if you ever work a game, you're going to get about 30 quick New York quick draw pencils from me. My dad stole it from someplace, and I need to still give them out at this point. But little things like that help. John likes a little Ziploc bag and a piece of paper in case things get wet. Some guys like taping their card, but a lacrosse scorecard, which also why it's in this shape, it also allows us to measure the stick, believe it or not, and do our measurement marks. And then the timer, and I put both types up. I prefer the small one. Some guys prefer the larger one. This one buzzes on your belt. It needs to be a 20 and a 20 and a, John, help me, a
140.
100 second. A minute 40 or
140,
100 second. Yeah. A minute 40 timer. So a 20 and a 140 is what we're looking for. Again, I like the small one, is loud, uses A23 batteries. So that's something also, again, if you're picking up at Walmart or Amazon, pick up a couple extra batteries as well, is because yours will always die in the worst time. Last game I worked. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, if you get a timer and it just has the 20-second timer, that's okay. You can use your watch to time the timeouts for a minute 40, and but whatever works for you.
And then the last part, and Mr. Nairmore always reminds me, so I found a slide on it, and so that's why I'm gonna remember it now, is we have 3 combinations we can wear. Adding jackets is allowed to this as well, but essentially short and shorts, short sleeves and shorts, long sleeves and shorts, or long sleeves and long pants. We cannot wear short sleeves and pants. Mr. Airmore always reminds me, and I finally remembered it at this point. And again, you can add black jacket to any of that. When we get to May, we move to white hats. If you're only buying a black hat and you're being cost conscious this year, just tell your partner they'll bring their black hat, even in May, for you. Quick break before we move on to the other ones. Do we have questions, comments, concerns?
I got a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it mandatory that we have the finger grip whistle, or can we still use the lanyard?
You can go with just the lanyard. Yeah.
I guess I would say most people use the finger grip, and it's recommended because it takes you an extra second to bring the whistle up to your mouth. So you see something, and then you get that extra time to decide, it helps you avoid inadvertent whistles, particularly among younger officials.
Yeah, agreed. There's technically nothing against having the lanyard. It's also it's an appearance thing, to be honest with you, right? It's the same thing of having the too baggy a shirt or things like that. Is generally speaking, the lanyard kind of still looks like a coach, so it's frowned upon, but there's nothing against that. And like I said, one of the top officials in the country actually uses a lanyard, right? So that's kind of the other side of the coin. He again comes from not only lacrosse but a basketball background, so very often refs with the whistle in his mouth. Everybody's a little different. You kind of find what you want to do. Same thing as a coach, I used a lanyard for forever, and then I kind of switched, and I never thought of needing a lanyard. But again, it's also when you're running, it's not dangling and things like that. So that just goes professionalism. But again, whatever kind of floats your boat in that idea.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the 20-second timer, when during the game period are we using that?
We will go over that. Yep, those will be in the timing constraints on that. We'll get you trained. We're getting there. Good question. Good question. So our personnel, just to run down these quickly, I think, yep, we're going to do each one. So again, we have a ton of personnel. So just to go through the definitions, to spend a little bit of time, again, nothing's going to replace reading the rule book on these, but a lot of these are common sense to the idea. Again, by rule, you need a minimum of 2 officials. So any youth game, JV game are going to run 2. Most high school varsities are also going to run 2. But we have, from time to time, you are allowed to use 3 people within a high school varsity game. And then most of our prep schools also run with 3-man crews. But there are some exceptions to that. There are some games where we're going to have 2-man crews for prep school. And then what we call JV or thirds might also be two-man. So there's different mechanics to those. We're going to go over the three-man on March 17th in a detailed video, and we have a ton of YouTube videos out doing that in an entire book on three-man. We're going to just go on two-man for the entire rest of this training here, but just wanted to give you that idea. There's always going to be what's called a senior official or a referee. Again, if you're a football person, that's your white hat, so to speak. We all wear the same color hats, but again, gives you an idea. The referee has the final say on everything, and it's not just a power trip. The idea is that once the referee's a tiebreaker in terms of what you wear, does your pregame. We'll talk to your coaches. Most guys, again, if you're newer, we put the newer guy kind of across the field, sometimes to start their career. But again, we will have the umpire or the kind of the secondary official start on the bench side. So when the first two quarters in the first half, when the game's not as hotly contested, they're near the coaches, and then we switch and the referee gets to go on the bench side during the kind of the crunch time. So again, we kind of have an order to that, and there's a few other things, but for sake of time wise, we'll keep it moving. You need some kind of visible scoreboard. Again, this is not a hard and fast rule. When we get to JV games, we want some kind of visible score. Again, that could be the old flip book, right? I always call it the basketball gym scorebook, right? With the red and green on each side where we're flipping numbers. That is more than fine. At the table, scoreboards are great. We want some kind of audible horn, as we said. If it's off the scoreboard, great, but we want some way to know at the end of periods, and also to know if there's an actual issue. There's a few instances where the score table might need to grab our attention. So we hit an air horn. Most high schools still supply those air horns at this point, or again, the scoreboard has that. When we get into that scorekeeping, there's a book. I felt like last year I spent like 20 minutes explaining this. I will be much quicker this year. We are not overly worried about the book. We do not sign books anymore at this point. We also are not overly worried if the other teams get everything into the book. It is on the scorekeeper and is on those teams to record all of those. Everybody generally does stats in a different way. Some people just do it off a video, but we need some kind of piece of paper at that table, and our official scorer needs to write penalties and the time they release and how long it was for two reasons. That scorekeeper is the official person who releases that person from the penalty. And then the second portion of that, we get into an idea of, we have ejections, which are really bad, which is usually a singular event that occurs and they are ejected. I think we got a chat, Vernon, if you could check that out for me. And then we have what's called a disqualification. That's if a player accumulates 5 minutes of personal fouls. We'll go over that later, but that is why we need all those penalties recorded. That scorekeeper has that official listing of all of those minutes. As we said, we have players on the field. We talked about the different positions. For our sake, there's not a massive difference between a goalie and any of the other three. It's just simply where they are standing is usually what we are worried about. And then within our game, we have additional specific language of face-off players, or what's called FOGOs, of face-off get-off. They simply take a face-off and they run off the field. I made my entire career doing that, so we can reserve jokes for later, and that's fine. We have a long stick midfielder. That is a special, again, that fourth pole, because all three defensemen have the long sticks. It is somebody who goes and will switch in and out of being a short stick or a long stick. And again, a defensive midfielder or a D mid is what you will also hear within that. We then have our coaches. Again, within any game, there's a singular head coach, and this is super important. We've had scenarios where even at the highest levels of high school and everything else, people will say, I'm a co-head coach, and we go, great, high five on your title, just one of you are in charge, you get to pick, and that's it. Same idea as a referee, and it's not to diminish or make fun of that secondary person, but when things go sideways or when we ask questions, we only talk to one person, and that's the head coach. They're going to certify that all of their players are properly equipped. They are also responsible for everyone. And by rule, they actually have to help us. They have to help us maintain order within the game. And that's the head coach's job. Also within the rule book, we are required to answer questions from the head coaches. So it goes both ways. By rule, we do not need to talk to assistant coaches. but we want to make every effort to be as courteous and professional as assistant coaches because they can also help us maintain order within the game if we have a lot of honey versus vinegar towards them. Again, we want to answer questions if they ask them respectfully, or we want to go to the head coach if it's not. And we'll spend more time on that in a different training session when we go over coaches and controlling the temperature of the game and things like that. We then get in kind of the last items, and we'll go through some unique things in the lacrosse world. But essentially, we have this thing called an in-home, which we asked in the pregame. All you kind of need to know when you start out of what an in-home does, they serve a penalty. If we don't know who the player was and we really can't get a player, the common sense way, I usually ask the head coach, right, of, hey, coach, we didn't get a number, especially in a JV game if they're wearing pennies and it's tough to see, or to your point, there's masking tape and everything else. And the coach goes, I have no idea who it is. Then we take whoever they gave us at the beginning of the game, and that is always a starting attackman. Or if the head coach gets or any of the assistant coaches get penalties, that in-home serves that penalty for that coach. We're still getting that number at this point before the game, along with some other information, but then we have that capability. And again, we use common sense, especially if it's a youth level or JV. We just want the correct person to serve, so we can ask sometimes.
And you're
Then
going to
we
mark
do
that on and you're going to mark that on your scorecard.
You and your scorecard. John and I have a thing about scorecards. It's a very long-standing inside joke at this point. We're going to get into pregame in just a second. We also ask for captains when we talk to the head coach. So we ask them to certify if all their players are properly equipped. We're going to go through that. Then our captains, there's not a lot that captains are responsible for outside. They come out, they shake hands, and then they do a coin toss. I'm going to go through that coin toss momentarily, and then they choose a couple options. But we can use captains as really good tools, and I mean that. That's part of controlling the game, especially when you get to higher levels, when it's youth or JV. A lot of the times, especially, and I always think of like a U10 game, it's the, hey, coach, who are your captains? Oh, hold on. Johnny, who's in charge today? And then they ask like the 7-year-old, right? And they say, Tim is. Tim, what's your number? Oh, Tim's still at soccer practice, right? And it takes you 30 minutes to get the They're not good tools, right? In a very nice way. They have no idea what they're doing. When you're at a high-level high school game or even a JV game and you know there is a captain, you can lean on them. You can say, hey, you need to get to this player is on the edge right now, right? Or sometimes ask them and things like that. And again, we'll spend more time kind of going through that. But again, gives you an idea of what we ask. The rules also allow ball retrievers. Very seldom do we see these used anymore, but if there's kind of junior players, so to speak, that's where the little guy picture, that's adorable, that's in there. They have to have a helmet. They have to have some kind of contrasting uniform so they're not miscued as a player, and they cannot be standing behind the goal. So they're not hit. They stand off to the sideline. Again, very seldom we see them. For the sake of, I think we want to we can run through these quick since we have a few minutes. We'll go through, again, we're not gonna do full breakout rooms, but regardless of your background, what do you think occurs within the game, or what we need to do, right? When these scenarios happen. So as an official, what do you think you need to do when the goalie breaks their stick?
Blow the whistle immediately, and I would say allow for the goalie to change the stick.
Yes, right? And we won't get into the exact ruling, right,
Question.
at this point.
Wouldn't that be like, okay, so I know I'm a basketball ref, so I know that possession, if one team, say somebody accidentally gets hurt or something, but they don't have possession, the other, you can't really blow the whistle to stop the play
Yeah.
because it
Yep.
takes away the advantage. Is that the same thing with this?
Stay with me first. What
Okay.
is the common reason? And I didn't say a player, I said a goalie. Why do we want a goalie to have a
Goalie,
stick?
my bad.
Yep. Why do we want a goalie to have a
Goalie
stick?
need a stick.
Right? Because if a goalie can't catch a ball, how fast can the ball
Defensive.
travel? Right? And seriously, not necessarily in all high school levels, but the ball, right? The Guinness record is 130 miles per hour. That goalie can die, right? And we don't want that to happen. But again, common sense, right? So to your point, I don't disagree. right? With the larger point, there are certain times where we blow an immediate whistle versus not, right? We'll get into that. But again, just a common sense, right? Awesome. If a player stays down after the hit, what's her initial reaction?
There's like an
Definitely
imminent
blow
scoring
whistle. Stop
opportunity.
everything.
You let the play go on.
Right? That
But
kind of
then,
goes to the same thing you asked, right?
yeah,
Where now we start thinking common sense. Where's the ball? Is there an advantage? Do we want to kill that advantage? Is that player in a life-threatening scenario? Probably not, right? We're not medical professionals. We're not making a judgment call immediately, but a goalie not being able to defend themselves is a very scary thing. A player who might have the wind knocked out of them, a little bit less scary, but still scary nonetheless, right? So again, we start thinking. A coach runs onto the field. What's her initial thought?
Um, you blow the whistle and probably assess some type of technical because there has to be a coach's box where they're not allowed to go into violation. So it would be a violation, no?
That is the most formal way of saying something bad has happened. Right? If a
Right.
coach is next to you, something's bad, right? To that point. But yes, to that point, right? Something very bad has happened, and that's not gonna fly, right? To your point. So then, again, you're using basketball terms. We'll kind of turn you into the correct terminology when we get there. But right, a very bad foul has occurred. Awesome. The scoreboard goes out, or we have lightning.
Stop the game.
Yeah, we got to stop the game, right? And I kind of put them as the same, right? The scoreboard, same thing, right? We might wait a half a second, but then again, there's important things on the scoreboard. We might need to stop the game right away. There's lightning, we have a life and death issue, right? And we got to stop it immediately. We have protocol. A player has the mouthpiece on top of their helmet. Same as lightning, different as lightning.
Tell them to put it back in.
Thank you, right? Common sense of can we get it right before the play? It's not life and death, but let's just get you right, right? So common sense. And so the same thing, a player with the ball who's holding the ball, one of their helmet straps are not properly buckled. What
Buckle
should
it
we
up.
do?
Buckle it up.
Yeah,
Hold it up. Strap
right?
it on.
If it's not a scoring play, there's no advantage, disadvantage. Maybe that player has the ball and is away from everybody else is waiting, right? In a half court offense, blow a whistle, buckle it up. Let's get it right. We're gonna get it going again, right? So super kind of common sense things. So just a little foray to break it up of me just talking, right? But again, you get it. It's all about common sense and how we go through. So the last couple slides here, and then we're going to finish within these 10 minutes here, is our game length. Now, again, this might seem like an abstract concept, but it's pretty simple when we break it down. We play 4 quarters within lacrosse. We don't do halves, and essentially we play one or the other, and that's it. For everything that is varsity, we play 12 minutes stop time. If you watch the TV games, there is pros, but if we watch college, they are playing 15. So just like in most sports, that college plays a little bit longer and high school plays a little less for varsity, and JV plays a little under that. JV, we have 2 options. We have a 10-minute stop clock or a 12-minute run. And those are our 2 options. If they ask for more time, we say no. If they ask for less time, we go, okay. And then you keep it moving, right? You take a half pause. You don't jump immediately, right? Just like when somebody says, yes, I'll go on a date with you. You say, I think that's a great idea. I think we should go for it, right? And again, we're a service organization. You're in a service role. We don't want to cheat, right, the players, but if they say, and it's happened, right? Hey, the sun is going down, or hey, we just played last night. And again, I'm thinking it's 10U, and my kids are really interested in just getting ice cream after the game. Can we play 8-minute run time? And we're all good, and both coaches agree, play the 8-minute run, right? And youth might have different based on the exact variation, but you get the overall point. When we're doing high school games, varsity has a 12-minute stop. We play by that. JV, we have 2 options. We ask the coaches. We get 2 minutes in between the first and second, and we get 2 minutes between the third and fourth. That is, as Eduardo asked, one of the reasons why we have a timer. As silly as it sounds, is that we want to make sure we time those. And again, I'll show you at one point, I'll show you the graphic. It adds up a lot if we don't time our dead time, is I've been at games observing, and there's 7 minutes in between the first and second quarter, and your game takes 2.5 hours to complete, and it's 48 minutes in total, right? Game time. We want you getting out on time. You don't get paid extra for saying they're 3 hours longer. There's a 10-minute halftime. Coaches might agree for shorter. We don't go longer than 10. So we allow short, not longer. Same on the quarter breaks. If they're ready to go at a minute 30, both teams out in the field, we can go. But we want them moving along and being quick on things. The few ones we'll go and we'll spend some time on this one. But again, we have two kind of different styles. And as kind of your homework this week, we have two different types. So as we want to practice, and if some of you haven't used the Fox 40, once you purchase that, you want to practice it. And I also used the Ted Murphy example. We want to practice with our whistle in our mouth so we can still communicate, believe it or not, even with a whistle in our mouth. And it takes a long time to do that. I will not talk any longer with a whistle in my mouth at this point, but you want to be able to where you don't spit your whistle out, or if you do have a whistle in your mouth, you can still communicate sometimes here and there, especially in things like face-offs or other things. But essentially, our quick cadence, which we'll go over, when we stop the clock, right? We put our hand up and we have a long blast, a long blast. That's too loud. Give me a signal real quick. But then we want to point which way we're going. And then we'll put our hand back in when we're paused. So hours in lacrosse, and we're going to practice this next week and the further weeks. This is always stop the clock and pause, right? We're not ready. And then we have full stop sign. I always call this kind of the yellow traffic light, right? This is red stop sign. Where two hands in our air is usually something's not correct. And I kind of usually have them out a little bit, right? With open palms. One hand up is I'm almost ready. We're kind of in waiting. And then when we point towards our goal and towards our directions, that's when we're ready. That's our green side. So then we kind of get into when we inbound it, we do a nice long whistle and we'll wind, right? As in winding the clock. And again, we'll go through these. And when you get chances to get on the field, and Mr. Nairmore is going to remind me to give you the opportunity. We have one coming up tomorrow as well, all ready to get out. But again, we have different things where we have a long blast when it's out of bounds and we're a tweet, right? And then when we come in, we go even longer, right? And things like that. And then when things get weird, we use different styles, right? Of, hey, we got a timeout, or what we call that cicada whistle, and we'll change it up. Or if we need your attention, we want to change it. So again, we have some consistency in things we're doing.
Hey, Rob.
Yep, go ahead.
Make sure you give them the Rob Hall of when you point, your thumb isn't up. You're hiding your thumb. And you don't point with a finger. You point with all fingers and you hide your thumb.
Correct. And so those are as you practice right in the mirror, or if you want to jump on like a video call or even your own camera, do these this week, right? Is again, not only the high school rule book, but the manual we're going to put out, and also the college rule book has all these signals. And one of the ones we'll attach is all of the Georgia Lacrosse Association. So that's Gordon, who's unfortunately no longer with us. Gordon does an amazing job explaining all these too, and is lovingly went out into a field for 6 hours and recorded all these, and he's great on them. But again, just watch yourself on video where you're at, of putting your hand straight up and pointing, as Dick said, nice and straight, and so you have a 90 degree, and then bring your hand in and see those things, right? And work on those. And as we said, we're gonna continually harp these in, but even make sure, when we do our whistle, we're putting the whistle in our mouth to that point, or if Connor, you're using that lanyard, get into the practice of how you're doing it. That little bit of muscle memory goes a super long way. And again, we're always kind of mimicking the clock, as we said, for our kind of basic mechanics for tonight. And I know we only got a few minutes here. And so our last bits of that is then we have, team timeouts. So we get 2 per half. As we said, there are a maximum of 2 minutes. That's where we use that timer. So we're recording that timeout on our scorecard, right? But the idea that after a minute and 40 seconds, we then remind teams that they need to get on the field, and then they get 20 seconds to get on the field. And we have a lot of simple timing things like that. We use the same time on purpose, where if it's, ready, for a face-off is 20 seconds, ready coming out of a timeout, you get 20 seconds. You have 20 seconds for a clearing count on defense. And again, we're going to go over all of these and things like injuries and things of that. Mercy rule, don't really worry if there's a 12-goal differential. We go to running clock in any of our games. And once we hit that 12, that next face off, we already start to rock and roll with our running clock. And then they have now updated the rule, regardless if it gets under a 12-goal differential, even if the team that was losing somehow miraculously comes back and is winning the game, we were always in running clock for that idea. The last bit too, we have overtime. So again, not only to those, the capability of we play the 4 quarters. If we're tied, the game of lacrosse does not allow for ties. Some youth organization or youth levels will allow ties, but if you're in a JV or a varsity game, we play a unlimited overtime. It is now called sudden victory. I was old enough to know that it was sudden death, and it was a lot cooler sounding back then, right? But we play, 4-minute periods. We get the captains again. We do a coin toss to just determine what goal they want to defend, things like that. We get one timeout. All things you'll learn, but within the rule, I just wanted to cover, the vast majority of things. As you read through those rules, there's a lot. There's even, an entire section about interruption of play. If it's, we'll play in just about anything except for lightning for the most part. But there's a lot of common sense. If it's a U7 game, they're not going to play in a downpour 9 times out of 10. Varsity games, yeah. Lightning, no, because we have metal everywhere with sticks and nets and things like that. So within that, we'll go through the lineup and the coin toss and the pregame next time. But for time's sake, I want to make sure we're kind of done correctly. But kind of as Dannery said, last year's themes was get the whales and not the minnows at that point. We have a new theme for this year we'll get into at our annual meeting. But again, a lot of these things are safety and common sense. At the end of the day, as you read through these first 3 rules, right? Or if you didn't read them already, go through them. If you're starting to go through them, great. We're going to obviously move on to how the game is played. So a lot more dense stuff next week. Try to get ahead a little bit so you know what we're talking about. But almost all of it's just common sense stuff and safety stuff at the end of the day. And it's about the rules either defining, prohibiting, or restricting. And then the last part of that too is make sure reach out to somebody on this phone call too that's not named Dick, John, or Rob. And if you want to hang out with Andy, you can too. He's not exempt from this. But the idea is to talk to one another, get an idea, and that is one of the best habits to get into as an official. And I know a lot of you are already doing that. You want to ask when things go wrong, or you want to call somebody and not wait 6 weeks for an answer. Poor John gets my call every time I get off the field. I go, John, we had some really weird stuff today. And I get all the weird stuff. Like, that's just the nature of my game. I just get really, because I do a ton of games. But then you learn stuff, right? It's, okay, this is what I called and why. And then we look up the rule and we go, I don't know, right? And then we talk about it. And then we might ask somebody else. And then all of a sudden it becomes a thing in a good way that you can learn and talk about and educate others, and you can educate yourself on it. So with that, as always, we'll stay on. Oh, I almost forgot. So Dick, you go first, and then I am going to ask everybody, hang on, I need your middle name. So Dick, you go first. I'm going to stop the recording and then get the attendance going.
So tomorrow afternoon from 4